What is up, my friends? So, for the past month or so, when this show got announced, there was a lot of backlash over it. Many people talking about that there was fat shaming, that there was many people upset about how the show was going to portray body images and whatnot. Because, and let me just start by saying I didn't really see what people were talking about. I kind of got the gist of it, and I think that it was more of a lack of not being able to execute very well what they were trying to do with the satire and whatnot. But I don't think they were deliberately out there to make a negative body image show, because after watching the show I can really say that they really weren't. I think that they had the edginess they wanted, and it just was too edgy, and they're just like edginess for edgy's sakes, and I think that they dropped the ball on that. Now, I don't think they were trying to make something that was going to offend or hurt anybody's feelings, but I think ultimately, I guess the show just got that bad rep from the beginning. So, anyways, let's just dissect the show first, talk about what the premise, the gist of it is, and then let's get into exactly what my thoughts are on this whole fat shaming. And the recent one is the whole LGBT thing with the one of the characters being bi. Anyways, the show basically deals with this chick named Patty, and then you also have this guy who's a lawyer, Bob, and they ultimately cross paths after he represents Patty in a case where she ultimately beat up a hobo or something like that. I forgot the part of that because there's just so much shit that happens in the show, like exorcisms, all that stuff. So let's just get into it. So he basically is like, I want to represent you. And Patty was like, she was overweight and she was made fun at school and whatnot. After fighting the hobo, she actually got her jaw wired shut, and this actually had her not being able to eat, and thus she lost the weight, and she is now like, Bob's like, I want to represent you in a beauty pageant. I think you could be like a star and whatnot. Now, what Bob has in his past is that he was actually accused by one of his former clients of being a child molester, and the reason was, even though it's all made up and whatnot, this still prevents Bob from being able to participate because he just has a bad rep with the whole community now. And now we see that he's like, I can get her to participate, and thus we help each other. Now it turns into a pretty weird predicament because Patty has sort of a crush on Bob, so yeah, it turns weird. Bob has his arch rival, the other Bob, as well, who is a lawyer, and also his daughter is in the beauty pageant as well, so it sets up some pretty interesting things. We later find out that Bob is actually has a thing for the other Bob. The other Bob feels the same way, and this is why they're such big rivals and kind of hate each other throughout the show, because they have this sort of love they're not representing. And then we get to a little bit much more forward after some pretty trashy ratchet stuff happens in this show, and we get into Patty now being kidnapped by Stella Ros. Now let's go back a little bit. Stella Ros is actually Bob. Like, she taught everything Bob he needs to know about beauty pageants. But Stella Ros had an affair with Bob, and she's still in love with him, but he doesn't really like put the feelings back to her. So she's like, I gotta get back at Bob, so I'm gonna take you. And he kidnaps her. And then ultimately she does escape Patty, and then she finds Bob, and Bob has now expressed his feelings with the other Bob, and they have a threesome with his wife, and Bob's like, let's live all together and be happy. The other Bob, however, is like, no, I don't think that's for me. So that makes the other Bob, this is getting confusing with the Bobs, be more depressed, and he's about to commit suicide. And then on the other side of things, we have Patty, who is now with her, I guess, boyfriend or whatever thing you want to call it, Christian, who has now kidnapped Magnolia. And Magnolia is another person working on the beauty pageant, and she is like Patty's rival, I guess you could say. He's like, let's kill her together, that way we can bond and you can win the beauty pageant, all this. Patty's like, that's not me. And then ultimately she kills Christian, she lets Magnolia go, and then she calls Bob for help just as he's about to commit suicide. And he's like, I think our paths are gonna cross one more time because of this. They ultimately dispose of the body, and then Patty confesses to Bob, I killed Stella Ros as well. And they look into the camera, boom, end. And now we're wondering, is a season 2 even going to happen because of all the controversy and whatnot that's going around this show? And I think that's more of an interesting thing, because I think this show had some pretty good potential with what it was trying to deliver, and the statements and scenarios it presented, but I think they just weren't delivered right, and that's what made it kind of sloppy and just head scratching at points. But I think that the show wasn't trying to deliberately hurt anybody's feelings. I think they were deliberately trying to be shocking and offensive, but at the same time, by the end of the joke, you would be like, like, I get it, what you're trying to do there. But I think some of the things that they do doesn't quite land there, and I guess I see how some people can be offended by that. And what I was talking about earlier with the whole bi thing is that a character in the show, who of course is Bob, mentions that bi people don't exist, and that's just like vampires or something like that, and that's what really offended people. But later on, you hear this character finally admit that he is bi, and I think that was just character growth development right there, not necessarily bashing LGBT or anything like that. So I don't know. It's pretty interesting how this whole thing started with the petition even to get the show off at the air, when there's a lot of other offensive things out there as well. But I think it was more that the show, I think it was more on the show for not executing it right. But I can see that they weren't really trying to go in that direction, because at many points throughout the show, they talk about how just because you change your outer appearance and whatnot and all that doesn't mean that you're going to be happy within. I really don't see the fat shaming going on. I mean, I do see, like, when they show the other people picking on Patty and whatnot and calling her names, but I think that's just something that happens on real life, so it's nothing that the show was making up or anything like that. I do think that the ending does qualify for it to have a sequel, and I would definitely be more inclined to see a sequel if I know that the jokes are going to be a little better written in the show as a whole as well. And that's just me. If they can do that and they can give us a great sequel, and you know how they always say the sequel sometimes is way better than the original, or maybe I get that mixed up. Well, look at The Dark Knight though. But I think that they can truly deliver on something unique and a good social commentary. But yeah, I let me know what you think. I've seen so many people on both sides of the argument. Some in the middle. I think I'm in the middle. I see some of the problems that people are talking about, and I don't think that's just necessarily meant to be like what the show's intentions were. I think that's just how it's written, and that it wasn't executed as it needed to be, and not really the show trying to go out of its way to be like, oh, we hate fat people. You know what I mean? That's not what the show, I think, was trying to say. I think it was just trying to say more of on a social, like it was trying to do too much and not really flesh it out as much, so it stayed superficial. And I think that's where, like, they got that whole this is a fat shaming show when it clearly wasn't from the beginning of the first episode. But anyways, what do you think about the show? What do you think about the ending? Should we get a sequel to this Fatty Patty Insatiable show, or should it just stay forgotten and maybe reappear on some Adult Swim type show like Network like 10 years later? I mean, I'm pretty sure that's where it's headed. I think this show is going to be like sort of a cult thing, and where it's like a sort of like shock thing to watch. But I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Speaking of sequels and season 2s, we do have the sequel coming for End of the Fucking World. I'm not too sure if it's going to be Netflix produced or if it's going to be through Channel 4 again, but we do have that coming, so I'm pretty excited for that. Of course, On My Block got renewed for season 2 as well. That's next year as well. I think we also have, what's that show? Big Mouth, and then Everything Sucks has been canceled, as we all know, which sucks. But anyways, let me know what other shows you would want me to watch on Netflix, or any movies on there as well. I'm trying to do as many of these as I can for Netflix now. I already did one for To All the Boys I've Loved Before. I have still the one coming up on The Package. Also, I have a Happy Times Murder video coming out tomorrow. By the way, that movie's trash. And then we got Searching. I'm not too sure if I'll release the Searching one this week or next week. We'll just see. But quite a few videos coming. I also want to talk about the Suspiria trailer, so that might be coming out tomorrow, and just things I noticed throughout. And I was going to do a reaction to it, but I don't know if I'm going to be doing reactions anymore, just because I think that the reactions get like taken down, or they get blocked, and then they get copyrighted. And then, like, you know, with a reaction, you want to upload it like minutes after the trailer and get that first initial. But with things like with blockage worldwide, content copyright, all of those things, it's just like you have to go back and re-edit it, and then you upload it like 2 or 3 hours later, and then it doesn't really get viewed like that because people have already watched enough of those. So I think I'm going to do something where it's more of like a content breakdown of it. And I've done them in the past before as well, but I think that serves better because those don't get copyrighted or blocked, and I can definitely upload that right away as well. So, I don't know, we'll see. But for Suspiria, I'm not doing it. I might just save those reactions for really big blockbusters, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, if you haven't already subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit that like, hit that comment. Let me know your thoughts. And as always, I'll see you next time. Stay positive.